Welcome to the Encinitas Chamber Chat Live podcast. I'm Carol Knight with the Encinitas Chamber of Commerce. With the help from my talented friends at Max Deluxe, we will showcase the many aspects and unique qualities of the Encinitas community. Whether it be focusing on local business owners, advice from experts, or highlighting some of the local gems Encinitas has to offer, we hope you'll find this podcast informational and entertaining. Any business or organization that uses technology, from communicating using email to conducting business online, will benefit by understanding cybersecurity risks, defenses, and how to remain resilient in case of a cyber incident. To walk us through best practices when it comes to cybersecurity and what business should be on the lookout for, I am pleased to have with me today Drew Facetti from the San Diego Law Enforcement Coordination Center, who specializes in cybercrime and cybersecurity, and Darren Bennett, the Chief Information Security Officer from the City of San Diego, both joining us today. Welcome. Tell me about what you do.
Yeah, so at the LECC, I basically help organizations, anywhere from a small business to a large enterprise, deal with a cybersecurity incident. We break it down into three sections, so you have pre-incident, during incident, and post-incident. So we'll help organizations strengthen their cybersecurity foothold, what they should do during an incident, and how to recover from an incident.
That sounds like a mouthful.
It is.
All right, and then Darren?
Hi, thanks. As Chief Information Security Officer for the City of San Diego, my responsibilities they're pretty broad. They include everything from assisting the departments in ensuring that their infrastructure is secure, that it is well thought out, and that it is architected in such a way that it's integrated. Really making sure that they're still able to do business, and that's one of the fun things about this job is trying to find that balance between secure and functional. I mean, if you unplug your computer, it's secure, but it's not usable. Another thing I do, I've been active in the security community for a long time. I worked for the FBI for 8 years prior to working for the city. I also teach as adjunct faculty at a local university, so I'm very passionate about getting word out. There's also a thing called the San Diego Cyber Lab, and I encourage the viewers to check it out. It's got free resources for the community. It's something we partner with the Law Enforcement Coordination Center on and other entities locally.
Well, you guys are the perfect guest to have with me today as we tackle this cybersecurity issue. So I have a quote that I read actually in the Wall Street Journal last week. According to the FBI, phishing scams led to losses of more than $43 billion between 2016 and 2021. So how has cybersecurity, or how you have seen cyber criminals impact the city of San Diego, but specifically the city of Encinitas as well?
Yeah, definitely. So, day to day, we have organizations submit what we call suspicious activity reports to the LECC. And it encompasses anything from physical threats to cyber threats. And a lot of the times, it's companies saying, hey, I got this phishing email, I clicked on the link, it looked legit, but I just wired them $600,000. Those are the extremes. Obviously, you have a lot less, but the thing to point out is that small businesses usually go out of business 60% of the time after a cyber incident. Gosh. And that's anything from phishing to ransomware, which I know we'll talk on. That's a hot topic in the cyber world today. But organizations are getting hit all the time. And when we go out and we make these discussions, we always hold back personal information, not to embarrass anybody or put that out there, just to show that its impact in San Diego County as a whole and the nation in general.
60%.
60% go out of business.
So how do you even begin to address those issues?
That's a fabulous question. Even from my days at the Bureau, I've been doing this for a long time, 25 plus years. I think it still comes back to what I call the basics and the idea that there is no silver bullet for this. Technology has moved along, and that's great for us as far as being able to use artificial intelligence, machine learning, all those fun, cool words. Unfortunately, it still comes down to, basics. Are you patching your systems? Do you have good maintenance in place? Do you do training with your employees? That same technology that helps us, unfortunately, helps our adversaries as well, and they use it. If cybercrime were its own country, or its own economy rather, it would be the third largest in the world after the US and China. And it's hard to really imagine when you think about that, how big that is. I mean, it's very profitable. There's a lot of motivation for our adversaries to be good at what they do because they know there's money there, and therefore we have to be better. And it really comes down to that basic hygiene, doing what's called defense in depth. And with defense in depth, you have multiple layers. Kind of like like a military base has multiple layers of defense. They have the front gate, they have badges, they have doors and locks on the buildings. If something's an armory, it's certainly protected differently than just an office building on the base. They have cameras, and they don't rely on any single thing. They rely on each of those. And the same is true in the cybersecurity world. We have our firewalls, we have our endpoint security on workstations, we have antivirus. And each one of those layers serves its part. And it's, if something sneaks past that first area, or in my analogy of the military base, if it gets over the fence, then okay, well, we have email filtering that monitors emails for malicious content like we were just talking about. Oh, it somehow got past that. Okay, we have antivirus on the desktop. And you have to have that holistic approach.
All right. So building on that, so what are those basic steps that, let's say I'm starting a business, what should I be doing? Just at the basics, and then obviously building from there.
Well, first and foremost is train your employees, right? Unfortunately, employees are the big reason why incidents happen. You train them on what a phishing email is, update their passwords if they need to, use a password manager. And I want to definitely get Darren's thought on this, but the most recent thing that NIST came out with was don't always change your passwords. It used to be every 90 days or so, change your password to stay secure. Nowadays, they're saying make one complex password, change it once a year, and find out if it's been compromised or not. And you can use tools online to see if that password has been taken by a Russian adversary or some malicious user, and if they're going to use it against you. It's definitely not the norm we're used to, where you change it every 90 days, get that little pop-up, but that's the first step. Train your users to know what a phishing email is and how to stay secure online.
I've heard that too. My husband's company, they were changing regularly, but now they're changing less regularly.
Yeah.
All right, so let's just go back and tell me what I should be looking for in a phishing email. I mean, this is 101 stuff, but a lot of people just don't recognize it.
Definitely. As time gets on, it's going to get more complicated due to things like ChatGPT. But initially, look at the domain name, right? So if you get an email, say from Netflix, make sure it says @netflix.com, right? And then really look at it, because they'll do an extra E or a 3 as the E. They might do a 1 as an L and kind of trick you to say that, hey, this actually looks like netflix.com, but it's not. The next is they'll have you click a button to go somewhere to update a payment method or update your contact information. Hover over the button and see where that URL leads. If it's not netflix.com and a bunch of other letters or numbers for the URL, that might not be Netflix. You can always copy that URL and post it in something called virustotal.com, and it'll tell you if it's malicious or not. So that's one way you can really look at a phishing email and say, all right, the domain isn't there, the links are bad, and look for spelling as well. But that's where you get into ChatGPT, because they can utilize those language learning modules to say, hey, I don't speak English as my first language, but I can make a Netflix email look legit if I just type into ChatGPT, make an email from Netflix, post it in, and then they're sending it on.
ChatGPT just keeps coming up wherever we go.
It's like I said, the adversaries can use those same tools that are really beneficial to us to their benefit. I mean, it used to be when you received a phishing email, a lot of times there were misspellings. Why? Because a lot of them are generated out of country and it's not the native language. English is not their native language. Whereas now, you tell ChatGPT to write you an email message and offering XYZ, it will do it, and it'll do it probably in better grammar than I would have. Not that that's a high bar, but, but and as Drew said, I mean, the doppelganger thing, which is the idea of if something is looking like it came from Microsoft.com, what they'll do is they'll register a domain, micr0soft.com. So even if you're fairly attentive and you're looking at those emails and you're following the rules, oh, I heard from Drew when he briefed us that we have to be extra attentive for spelling errors. Okay, there's no spelling errors. We have to make sure it came from Microsoft. Well, you page over and it looks like it did at quick glance, and it's getting increasingly difficult. One piece of advice that I would mention that Drew, I know you know this one, but is the old saying, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
So I was going to ask other red flags. That would be one of them.
That to me is the ultimate one. I tell people to treat the internet like a big city. I grew up in a suburb of Boston, and the city is a wonderful place. It can be very dangerous. You can also, has a lot of good. And just like my credit card in the city, if I see some place that looks sketchy, I'm probably not going to use my card there. I'm going to probably use discernment. And the same thing with the internet. Same thing with if you receive something that sounds too good to be true. I had a friend that he lives another city, but right nearby, and he was looking for a new place to live. And he got scammed because someone discovered that he was posting a request for looking for a new home. And these guys had a really good script. They talked to him about the place they have, went out and met him, not in person, but on the phone. They said, we'll meet you, we'll open the door. And there was an electronic site where you can open doors remotely for houses that are for sale, not for rent. And unfortunately, he got a tour of the place, put down a deposit on rent, and it was a scam.
Oh my goodness.
So these guys are getting better and better. And again, if it sounds too good to be true, it might be. And the ultimate thing that you can always do is you can reach out to someone like the LECC. You can reach out to the Cyber Lab. You can reach directly out to the source. So don't use whatever number or link is in the email. But if you got an email from your credit card company, call your credit card company from the back of the card and ask them. And unfortunately, more often than not, you'll probably be surprised that it's not from them.
So when I think about cyber crime, I'm usually thinking about big companies. So why go after the little independent business owner?
Because they know that they don't have the best security in place. Cybersecurity at some points does get expensive. You can implement great policies and procedures without spending a lot of money, but they know that if a small mom and pop shop or a small business in general is down for 1 to 2 days, that might be it. Whereas if Google is down for 1 to 2 days, they lose a couple billion, but they're going to bounce back. They know those small mom and pop shops are going to pay to get any of their services back online, and that they're going to do more drastic measures to resolve the issue.
All right. So basically, they're getting payment really where they can, and they're just cobbling a lot of payment together to think it's a win.
Yep. Exactly.
Wow. All right. So beyond the phishing, what else? Are there any things that business should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, I know I touched on it, but the hot keyword is ransomware, right? And if you don't know what ransomware is, it is malicious software, which we call malware. It gets into your system, it encrypts all of your files so you can't open them, and it demands a payment to get those files back. Users or the adversaries have taken a step further, and they will actually copy all of your files, put it on their own server. So that way you make one payment to decrypt your files to get back online, but then you make a second payment so they don't post it online for everyone else. That's the biggest one. They're going to target anybody, and when I mentioned take drastic measures in hand, that's where your small business will go out and they'll buy Bitcoin. They'll send it to these adversaries because they want to get back online, because they know any time that they're down is a caution or is a danger to that business where they won't be back online in the future.
And Drew, I know in my days back at the Bureau, when those people are trying to extort money from you, it's like in the movies, I think, right? Like, just because you pay them once doesn't mean, oh yeah, we'll really delete all the information that we stole.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't trust those guys.
They're going to come back for more and more and more.
Yep.
I can, if you don't mind.
Expand, but I have a lot of questions.
What is the recommendation? And I know the answer that I would have, but for organizations, should they pay these ransoms?
Oh, that was my question. Yeah, exactly.
From FBI's point of view, never pay the ransom.
Okay.
You don't know who that money's actually going to. You could be paying someone who's sanctioned by the Treasury Department. And lo and behold, you could be funding the Russian military. You could be helping the Ukrainian effort in that war. You could be funding a terrorist organization, depending on who it is. You never know who that money is actually going to and who's behind the keyboard. Don't make the payments, and I know you're probably going to touch on it, but backups are the best way to recover from ransomware. There's a method we call the 3-2-1. Make 3 copies of your backups. Make 2 copies, 1 digital and 1 physical, and store 1 offsite from your location. That way, if you're hit with ransomware, you can wipe all your systems, restore from backup, and you're good to go. The only issue is if they have exfiltrated your data, that's still something you have to keep in mind. Are you willing for them to post it online for everybody to see? Or are you going to make that payment?
So for someone like the Chamber of Commerce, we use an external database for processing and things like that. Are those things that we have to have, or any business would have to, a lot of people have CRMs, right? Protected differently, the same, an extra layer of protection?
Protected the same. It really kind of depends. Like a lot of people think cloud security, right? Or using the cloud in general. I definitely want to get Darren's thought on this too, but we are going to the cloud. There's no stopping it. And everyone thinks, well, if Google or Microsoft or Amazon has my data, it's secure because they have great security implementations. But that's not always the case. The data that you put in there, that's always going to be on you, no matter what. You have to protect that data. And sure, they'll make customizations and policies to say, no one can get into this database, and we're going to protect it the best we can. But if someone does get in there, that's still on you to set those policies to say, who's allowed to access this data, how much can they get, and things of that nature.
All right, so if I suspect that there's something fishy going on, who do I call?
Not the Ghostbusters in this case. There's a few people you can call. One is us. We are sd-lecc.org.
And LECC stands for?
The Law Enforcement Coordination Center.
Okay.
We're one of 80 fusion centers across the country that are funded by the Department of Homeland Security. And our job is to reach out to the community and get them in touch with federal organizations and vice versa. So there's always a flow of communication there. When you go to our website, you can select submit a suspicious activity report, an SAR. You can select cyber attack and describe everything that's occurring, and I will get in touch with you or someone from the FBI will. If you'd rather go the federal route, which either way it gets back to us at some point, you can call the FBI field office or go to ic3.gov and submit that information there, and that goes directly to FBI.
So that all feels a little intimidating to me. Is there anyone more of a local level? Does the city of Encinitas have someone, or would they just pass it right on to you anyway?
So they can reach out to Jessica. I know she's the Chief Information Security Officer for the city, and she does pass information over to me. And I mentioned it earlier, but all PII is kept, that personal identifiable information is kept secure. No one's going to know who you are, your victim name. At most, myself or the FBI will know, but we need that to help you out. No one's going to know what's actually going on behind the scenes.
And then let's say the FBI calls me up. How do I know? I mean,
so
how do I know you're the FBI?
Exactly. The best case to do in that situation, and this is more of a...
I mean, right? You never know.
An in-person physical instance, usually they'll send an agent out because they want to gather some evidence, right?
Right.
While they're in front of you, don't talk to them, just ask them their name, get the number for the local field office, call them and say, can you transfer me to this agent? Their cell phone will ring and you go, okay, this is who they say they are. That's the best way to verify that that's an actual agent in front of you.
And that's critical. When I worked for the Bureau, we would even show up on site with our credentials and flash our credentials, and people would rarely, most of the time, they'd just give us what we asked for, which is a little scary.
Right, right.
But several times, people that are a little more savvy would say, hey, you know what? How do we know you're really who you say you are? And we're like, well, and they don't get offended by that. They're like thankful. They're like, well, that's a really good question. You know what? Why don't you look up the local FBI office's phone number yourself, rather than us give you a phone number and claim it's the FBI. You call them and ask them if there is a computer scientist or an agent that has been dispatched, and they will, and they'll confirm it. And it's similar to what I was saying about the email phishing. It's the same thing. In my opinion, it's not trust but verify. It's don't trust and verify.
Right.
In that case, where you just want to make sure, the consequences of this being incorrect, they're pretty serious. So let's verify it right to the source.
Right, right.
Drew made a excellent point, Drew, on that one.
Yeah, two questions. One is, how about the ones that you don't open? I mean, can you just delete them?
So you can delete them. Another thing you can do, and I'm open to this, you can send them to me directly, and I look at those and I can go, okay, this is what that domain is. This is what the headers are in that email. And we can analyze that and see what's really going on behind the scenes. We can take all that together and create what we call a product in the government world. It's just information that can be sent out to the community. It's not classified. And we can let the city of Encinitas know, or anybody else, these are phishing emails that we're seeing targeting this organization. Here's what you can look out for to prevent you from clicking on them. And if you have any questions, reach out to us.
Okay, that sounds like a plan. Speaking of plans, there's an incident response plan. What does that look like?
So an incident response plan can cover a lot of things. In cyber, we don't just have incidents, we have disasters too, and that's a whole another topic for a disaster recovery plan. But incident response, you need it before an incident occurs. We see this all the time, and I know Darren has definitely seen some incidents where somebody gets hit with ransomware, some cyber incident, and they don't have a plan. They don't know who to call. They're wasting so much time scrambling to find a number or a person, but this incident response plan can help. And all it does is it prepares you for an incident, and that can be a phishing email that you clicked on, a ransomware attack, if you have wire fraud, anything that you can think of. You create a plan on who to contact, the numbers that are available. You update it about once a year to make sure everything is secure, and you just know who to go to immediately, rather than scrambling and going, who am I going to email? Who am I going to call?
Right, right.
The
Can
key
you
to
expand on that?
Yeah, sure. The key to those plans, in my opinion, too, is that you do tabletop exercises. So you not only have a plan, but you practice the plan. In karate, if you go to the dojo, they do forms, they're called, where they do practice blocks with no one even throwing punches, and so it becomes a reflex. And you really need to do the same kind of thing with your incident response plan. How do you know it works? The other thing, back to the backup conversation too, I like to call them restores, because just because something gets backed up and says it was successful, how do you know? Well, the only way you know is if you periodically do restorations of files, probably not to their original location, because you don't want to clobber existing,
Right.
but to another one, and verify that you can access that. And that's absolutely critical. I can't tell you how often I have gone to an incident and they've been like, oh, we have backups. I'm like, that's so great for you. We're all set. And then they call later on saying, our backups weren't running the way we thought, or we missed something. So yeah, I think it's, there's a lot to it, but yes, you need to verify that.
And I like what you say about practicing. Same thing in public relations, a crisis communication plan. If there's an incident that happens with some other company, it's not yours. You still go through the exercise, so you know you're ready and prepared.
Yeah, and we do it with the executives, and that's really fun, because and again, you have to come at it with the right attitude. You can't come at it with like, haha, we're going to see that you guys. Of course, no one is prepared for these crazy events. But I mean, we've done tabletops for everything from like an EMP attack, right?
Magnetic pulse.
Magnetic pulse, which takes the power out. It's feasible, but it's unlikely, to something that, in my opinion, is a lot closer to home, which would be a ransomware attack that infects all the computers in a region. Well, suddenly that could be devastating. And which of those two things is more likely? Well, we know that the ransomware attacks have been happening all over the country. And when you do that and you involve your mayor, or if you're in a corporate environment, your board members, your CEO, it's really interesting to see how they want to respond to that. Do we get legal involved? How do we deal with the human resources aspect? At what point do we contact law enforcement? Should that be kind of a scary thing, which it really shouldn't. Again, I'm biased because I worked for the FBI, but I'll tell you right now, the folks I know at the Bureau are unbelievably talented, gifted people, and they care, but their goal is the opposite of having it end up in the media. Their goal is that they want to be able to research it and get the bad guy. And if it ends up in the media, guess what? The bad guy knows someone's looking for him.
Right. But a lot of these companies, there is no human resource, there is no lawyer.
Right,
It's a company of three. It's a company, the Chamber of Commerce, we have 2.5 full-time employees, a lot of volunteers and board members, but we don't have that bandwidth. We don't have those resources to go to. So our call probably would be, if anything happened, would be to you first, or the city, I imagine.
Yeah, and you can call us. And one of the things, we have a private sector partnership unit, and they go out there and they make those relationships with the cities or organizations, and they offer TTXs. So we can do a cyber TTX with you. If you want to take it a step further, you can contact CISO, which is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and they're a part of DHS. And they love all of their acronyms being mouthfuls, so you can never say it. But CISO's great. They have cybersecurity advisors in every location.
Okay.
San Diego has one in the next few months. It's currently open, the position. But they'll work with the cities or small businesses, and they'll say, listen, we're going to run a TTX this day. You can come. It's up to you.
TTX.
Oh, sorry. Tabletop exercise.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, more acronyms. We'll run a TTX. You can come. It's up to you. We can customize it for larger organizations, but this is for small businesses. You can come, and you can see how that actually occurs with a lot of people and how you can scale it down just a few people and get those incident response plans in place.
In fact, we're having a cybersecurity workshop on August 24th. So I know you guys are available via Zoom, and we have a couple other partners, Jessica from the city, Captain Lawrence from the Sheriff's Department, and others who will be joining us to talk a little bit about this to our small businesses.
Yes, ma'am. We're looking forward to it. Anything that we can provide to the community to help strengthen that defense is a lot better than any response that you can give.
Right. And then, all right, so let's talk about ransomware. Are there red flags there that we should be looking for versus the phishing emails?
It depends on what softwares you have in place. I know Darren can touch on a lot more than that. I usually, at that response of ransomware, I'm usually seeing it after it's already occurred. And there's things you can look at forensically, and you look at, if your files, if you have one file called, I guess, profits.word or whatever the word extension is. And you may see another copy, but that extension is .alvph or something that's completely different, but it's the same file. That's a red flag. They're copying your files and encrypting them, and then they're going to start sending them back. So if you have an IT team, you can kind of see why is 1 gigabyte of data being sent every minute to this external server that we have nothing on our network. We don't know what that is. There are red flags that IT individuals can see. For small businesses, just be careful what you click on. Those phishing emails are a great way they can get in. And utilize any resources you can find online or the LECC, and we can provide you ways to defend against those attacks. I know Darren can definitely touch on more of those red flags.
I think first I want to emphasize, Drew has an agenda from where he works, but he is one of the most underutilized, valuable resources in our region, and thank you for having him here.
Thank you, guys.
It's, Drew, you just probably quadrupled your workload, but Drew is fabulous.
That's what we're here for.
So what can you do to protect yourself against ransomware? If it's happened, you know who to contact. I think also working with Drew and finding out what's happening for security events, for training, what's happening with local organizations and taking part, even if you're really a small entity or a small business, make sure you're participating because you have so much to lose. Aside from that, again, I talked about layered defense in depth, all those layers. It's like an onion. You have to peel back one because you have to assume you never want to rely on any, same thing when you're fighting a fire. They don't rely on just the sprinkler system in the house. They design the house in such a way that it's got clearance from the forest and all of that. You need to have the same kind of things in place. Ultimately, I think that one of the things that for an end user that's really critical is you have some kind of endpoint security product in place. And I won't name names, but if you Google endpoint security, there are several really big names out there and they're very effective. What they do, what I love about them is if it sneaks past all those layers of the onion, because it's some brand new cutting edge malicious software, and it makes it to the desktop, suddenly it starts to encrypt your drive. What the endpoint security software does is it knows your normal behavior and it says, this isn't normal behavior for her to encrypt her whole drive. So it stops it and it alerts the security team. Or it just stops it and alerts you if you're a single end user. And that's kind of, I said there's no silver bullet, but that's as close as you can get in my opinion. And the really neat thing about that is it's not relying on a signature like a lot of antivirus tends to do. It knows, hey, we've seen this bad thing before, here's what it looks like. It's just saying it's very unusual for a user to encrypt their own hard drive. Sometimes you do it legitimately, but I think we're going to put a hold on this and make sure that it's legitimate and then allow the person.
Sort of like the bank when they call you up to say, are you really spending $1,800?
Perfect analogy. I wish I had thought of that. Yes.
Right? No, I'm actually not even
will
close,
use that. I'll
right?
use that
And
again.
never shop there anyway. Yeah. So I actually just had that. I think it was a Zoom. It was like $1,800 for Zoom.com. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah.
And they're surprisingly inexpensive. Again, if you're a smaller organization, you have 20 users, I don't want to quote prices, but it's a very small price to pay for a high level of confidence. Are they perfect? No. And again, you're going to hear my recurring little theme here, right? If you have the endpoint security, that gives you a little bit more ease. But you better go for the backups, as Drew said as well, so that if all those layers fail and the endpoint security, for some reason, it sneaks past it, okay, you still can restore from backup and still be in good shape.
Right. Which goes back, which leads me to how costly is this stuff? Hopefully not too much. Again, every penny counts. You're a small business. You're trying to get off the ground. You're trying to pay your employees and rent and all that kind of stuff. So that the endpoint security seems like a obviously reasonable investment.
All of this stuff, the problem is, again, it's like anything. It's like protecting our homes here in Southern California from earthquakes.
Right.
They build them to a set standard that's supposed to help with that. Some people add more to that. You can get insurance. A lot of people don't have earthquake insurance in Southern Cal. I know that's not shocking to those of us who live here, but it is to most of the world. You can spend a fortune and still have some risk. So it becomes a business decision. And especially in my role, that's where, it's a fine balancing act. And there's always push and pull between what is needed and what is ideal. And that's just part of the game. And Drew has seen that, and I'm sure you get to advise on that, Drew, quite a bit out there where companies are asking. And I have a lot of peers that reach out to me from other cities or from other organizations and say, hey, Darren, what are your thoughts on this? And that's one of the things I love about the community here in this region and people like Jessica and Drew, and we know each other. And we're very quick to reach out and say, hey, you know what? What are you guys using for your layers of the onion? Okay, here's what we're using. Are you having success with this one? And if you're a small business, we welcome you to come in and join that and get involved and get to know that. And if you don't have the resources or the time for yourself because you're an attorney or you're a realtor and you're like, I don't want to be cyber, great. Then look for a managed service provider, MSP, managed security provider, and they should charge you a fraction of what a full-time person would cost, and they can handle all of that.
Got it. Well, that's
you
why
got me going there.
Yeah,
I'm very passionate
that's why
about
I'm
that.
hoping the cybersecurity workshop will help outline some of those steps that people can take place and give you an idea of good, better, best type of, this will be okay, but if you go this level or in the next level, this is where you're going to be most secure.
Yeah, and just to touch on what Darren was saying about those MSPs, they have what we call SOCs, which are security operations centers, and they operate 24/7. So if it's 2 a.m., you might get a call from them, and it's going to protect your business. Because you got to realize we are in different time zones. Those guys in Russia are working when we're sleeping and vice versa. So MSPs are a great way to go. It saves you a lot of money. Being from the government world, obviously I can't make recommendations, but there are alternatives and there are cheaper options than others. And I think one of the best things that any small business can do is learn about cybersecurity yourself. Even if you use an MSP or you use endpoint security, just kind of realize what is going on. What are the current threats? What can you do to prevent it? Like with ransomware, always patching your software, your applications. The biggest thing is there's a website called ExploitDB, which is a database. And we use it every day to see what those current exploits are. So malicious users are using it. And they go on there and they see, okay, Adobe software has this exploit. Word has this exploit. And not to pick on those are just some popular ones everyone has. And they see what those exploits are, or those vulnerabilities are, and they exploit them. And they go out there and they go, I can target this company if they're using this software and things like that.
All right, so tell me about the two-factor, how that plays into the security.
Yeah, and apologies for not mentioning it. It's one of the most simplest things you can implement, but it's the best you can actually implement. So two-factor or multi-factor authentication, there's two different routes you can go. Two-factor is you put in your username and password. That's one form of authentication. And the next is you might get a text message, right? That says, here's this code, implement it here. You type it in and you gain access. When it comes to multi-factor authentication, personally, we don't recommend using text message based because there are things called SIM swapping where malicious users can gain access to your phone through the SIM card. They call up a cellular network and say, hey, I'm pretending to be you. I lost my phone. This is my new one. Can you activate my number on this new phone? Then what happens is they use your credentials to log on. That text gets sent to you and they log in that way. You use authenticator apps like Google Authentication. Authy's another good one. Microsoft has their own. And in that case, username, password, you get the code and you throw it in there. Sometimes you can use all three, which we call multi-factor. So username, password, the text, and the application itself. There are physical copies you can use where those codes reset every minute. And it's just a way to prevent users from gaining access to your account if they have your credentials. So again, adding more layers to that onion.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I agree with Drew. It's a really good one that you brought up. I mean, the endpoint security is critical. Backups are critical. Unfortunately, in our world, I think we feel every single one of those is critical.
Right.
But definitely enabling two-factor, is vital. Someone was asking me about, do I do that for every single account? Don't I get a whole bunch of texts, or do you approve to connect here or enter your code? I do it for a lot of them. There are a couple I don't, but those are things that I do not care about at all. Things like my banking account, things like secure logins that are related to business, I absolutely require it. And as a matter of fact, at your organization, when you're vetting software products, especially cloud-based products, there are a couple fundamental things. One is the data encrypted when it's going across the wire to that organization and encrypted at rest so that it's protected should someone hack it. And another one is, does your product support two-factor?
Right.
And fortunately, in the last couple of years, it's gone from where a small percentage offered that, as surprising as that sounds, to where now the vast majority know that if they want to continue to stay in business, they need to keep up. The other thing we encourage is that they have a way for sharing log files back to the organization that is doing business with them if they're in the cloud, so that the team can track logins. The team, if they have a after-hour SOC, one of the tasks that you'll give that SOC is to say, hey, I want you to monitor logins and see if you see a bunch of weird failed attempts in the middle of the night, indicative of someone knocking and trying different codes. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, but that's a very critical one. So I'm glad that's a good one to bring up.
Yeah. And one thing I'll add on real quick is one of the vulnerabilities we have is called MFA fatigue. So like Darren mentioned, you'll get the, do you approve yes or no?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Really, again?
I know. So what adversaries will do is they'll create some code and they'll get your credentials. They could find it online on the dark web. It really just depends. And they'll create a program where it puts the username and password into this website or wherever the application is. They'll hit submit and then you'll get the response, right? Yes or no. You hit no. Well, then maybe 1 second later you get it again. You hit no. And they will continuously do this and they can do up to 1,000 requests in 10 seconds. And at some point you go, all right, maybe it's glitched. I'll just hit yes so it stops popping up. And then you've given them access.
Oh my gosh.
So that's one thing to keep your eye out for.
They're very creative.
They're so creative and smart.
Unfortunately, immoral doesn't mean or not intelligent.
Right. Right. All right. So I guess that's a good segue. So what's coming down the pike? We talked a little bit about ChatGPT. What else is out there in the cyber criminal world? We don't know.
It's a combination. Obviously, like Darren mentioned, they're immoral, so that doesn't mean that they're stupid, but they're also very intelligent when it comes to ways to exploit anybody. One thing you will hear a lot is quantum computing, how that might increase ransomware speeds or it might increase ways attacks are done. But you got to look on the flip side. If they increase how the attacks are occurring, we can increase how defenses go into place. You look at things like crypto hashes. So we have like SHA is a secure hashing algorithm. When quantum computing comes out, we might be on SHA 3000 and whatever. We use multiplications of 8 at that point. And it really just, if we have stronger defense with quantum computing, the attacks really won't matter. So as long as we stay up to date on defense, that's one thing. But they're always going to find a way, unfortunately. And the best thing we can do is be prepared for whatever that is. You mentioned ChatGPT, that gets talked about a lot. It's a language learning module, so it only gets as smart as what you put into it. And millions of people will put things in. And you'll have the trolls who go, what's 2 plus 2? It tells you 4, and it goes, no, that's not the right answer. If you feed that enough to it, it'll go, maybe I am wrong. Maybe 2 plus 2 isn't 4. So they're using it more as a tool to kind of increase their attacks rather than create the attacks themselves. So right now, realistically, I'll say ransomware is still on the rise. They'll continue to be on the rise. But other than that, it's unpredictable, unfortunately.
And that's why you guys are here. Keeping us safe.
And we hope so. It's a fun job. It's very challenging.
Yeah.
I think distribution attacks is another area that is we're seeing more of, and there's not the hard thing with that one, the end users really have a hard time. It's the idea that if you were to buy, and I won't name whatever brand computer, and have it shipped to your house, if that computer is manufactured in a foreign country, they could do things to that computer before they send it. Allow a backdoor on that computer. Same thing with software. If you buy antivirus from a foreign country.
There was an incident a few years ago.
There's been multiple incidents related to various organizations, and even the government recommends, and again, Drew and his team can talk to companies about this. There's certain things they recommend you not purchase from certain organizations. So again, it's kind of like my city analogy, though. You just want to be diligent, use common sense, make sure you buy from a reputable seller, and whether you're buying a Dell, an HP, a Macintosh, whatever. I remember when I was younger in the business world, I did some travel into the Far East, and we got there and there were these technology booths that were just set up everywhere and selling things so cheap because that's where a lot of it's manufactured. I'm like, great. I would strongly discourage buying from something like that and not direct from the manufacturer through trusted channels that can verify. Unfortunately, you can get incredible bargains, but just like we said with the email phishing, if it sounds too good to be true, it just might be.
All right, well, I thank you both for being here today. I encourage everyone to attend this cybersecurity workshop on August 24th. It's via Zoom. Go to encinitaschamber.com for more information. We also have on our website additional cybersecurity resources, so you can check those out as well. So thank you again for
Thank
being
you.
here.
Appreciate
Thanks.
it.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for tuning in, and thanks to our sponsor, Max Lux. Join us again for the next episode of Encinitas Chamber Chat Live. For more information on the Chamber and its activities, please visit encinitaschamber.com.